Imagine a creature the height of a two-story house, a 6-ton predator whose jaws could splinter steel, engineered to shear through an automobile as if it were bone. Its body is not a landscape of scales, but a cloak of down and ack. Each is capable of lifting 200 kilograms. This is Tyrannosaurus, not the monster of cinematic legend, but the animal as reconstructed by decades of discovery. And it stands as a monument to a profound deception, a fiction we have mistaken for fact since childhood. Open almost any children's encyclopedia. 9 out of 10 illustrations are pure fantasy. Not artistic license, not a minor inaccuracy, but a falsehood we have collectively embraced as history. Green, scaly behemoths dragging their tails through the mud. Slow, dim-witted giants, too stupid to survive a falling star. Bloodthirsty killers with teeth perpetually bared. This entire gallery of monsters is a product of 20th century scientific error, multiplied by Hollywood spectacle and the inertia of outdated textbook. The most shocking revelation is not that we were wrong, but that the truth has been known for 30, even 40 years. Paleontologists have proclaimed it at conferences, published it in peer-reviewed journals, and detailed it in books. But the image from the silver screen is so deeply etched into our consciousness that it has become almost impossible to erase. Let us begin with the most famous dinosaur on the planet, Tyrannosaurus Rex, the tyrant lizard king. For generations, we have pictured a green or brown monster with leathery reptilian skin. This is the first, and perhaps greatest, of the myths. For decades, the logic seemed simple. Dinosaurs were reptiles, and reptiles have scales. It was a clean, elegant, and utterly incorrect assumption. Dinosaurs were not reptiles in the modern sense. They were a unique branch of a... The first hints of the truth emerged in the 1990s from the fine-grained stone of China. There, fossils were unearthed with the unmistakable impressions of feathers. At first, they walled downy coat. Then came larger finds. Dilong, an early tyrannosauroid just 1.5 meters long, was found cloaked in primitive proto-feathers. The evidence was mounting. Finally, there was Tyrannosaurus, a giant weighing 1.5 tons, its body covered in long. The monster we imagined was a phantom. The reality was something stranger, more complex, and far more magnificent. The past is not a static diorama. It is a living science, constantly redrawn by the evidence we unearth from the deep silence of time. With each fossil unearthed, the truth became more and more apparent. The whispers of a revolution in paleontology grew into a roar that echoed through the halls of museums worldwide. Feathers, it turned out, were not an anomaly. They were the rule. An entire dynasty of dinosaurs, the theropods, the two-legged predators that dominated the Mesozoic, were cloaked in them. From the diminutive Compsognathus scurrying through the undergrowth to the formidable 9-meter Allosaurus, they all bore some form of feathery integument. And here the story turns to the tyrant king himself, Tyrannosaurus Rex. The evidence for its own plumage is circumstantial, a ghost in the fossil record. It lived too late in time, and in a part of the world where the conditions for preserving such delicate structures were almost non-existent. The fine-grained volcanic ash of China's Yixian Formation can create a perfect death mask, capturing the spectral imprints of soft tissues. But the coarse sediments of North America's Cretaceous floodplains rarely grant such miracle. Yet the case is overwhelming. We have its relatives, unearthed from those very Chinese formations, entombed with their feathers intact. We have skin impressions from young tyrannosaurs, showing scales on certain parts of the body, but crucially, not all. These patches of armor on an otherwise pliable canvas leave ample room for a downy coat. And finally, we have the unassailable logic of evolution itself. If an animal's closest ancestors and cousins all share a trait, the probability that the most famous member of that family also possessed it is immense. The modern reconstruction of Tyrannosaurus is therefore a breathtaking synthesis of reptile and bird. Its head, perhaps, was covert coat of primitive scaly armor and feathery structures. The young would have been almost warmth. As they matured into multi-ton adults, they may have shed some of this covering, retaining it in patches for display or insulation. Imagine a 6-meter-tall predator, a creature that is less a movie monster and more a terrifying force of nature. Less frightening than the beast of the cinema? The real victims of the Tyrannosaurus would have vehemently disagreed. But here lies the strangest twist in this prehistoric saga. Even after these discoveries, after hundreds of scientific papers and dozens of documentaries, Jurassic Park, released in 1993, sealed a specific image in the amber of public consciousness: a naked, scaly, reptilian titan. When the franchise was resurrected in the 2010s, a time when the evidence for feathers was irrefutable, the science was completely and deliberately ignored. The filmmakers publicly admitted their choice, stating that audiences were not ready, that they craved the monsters of their childhood. And so, a profound schism was created. Educational programs, museums, and scientific channels present one reality, while mass culture perpetuates a fantasy. Children grow up with toys of incorrect dinosaurs, watch films with incorrect dinosaurs, and then often go to schools with textbooks featuring those same incorrect dinosaurs. The circle of misinformation is complete, a cultural inertia that resists the crushing weight of fact. This stubbornness extends beyond the skin. Consider those famously diminutive arms, so often the subject of ridicule. They are portrayed as useless appendages, too short to reach the mouth, too weak to serve any purpose. They have become a biological punchline, a symbol of nature's imperfection, proof that evolution sometimes makes mistakes. This, too, is a fiction, born from a failure to grasp the brutal realities of biomechanics and functional anatomy. The forelimbs of a Tyrannosaurus were indeed short, but they were anything but weak. The bone structure was incredibly robust, and the attachment points for muscles were enormous, indicating immense power. Biomechanical studies suggest that a single T-Rex bicep could curl over 400 pounds. These were not vestigial limbs, they were highly specialized weapons for close-quarters combat. Theories suggest they were used to hold struggling prey close to the devastating jaws, or perhaps as vicious, flesh-tearing hooks to inflict deep wounds on a victim. They may have even served as anchors, allowing the animal to push its multi-ton body up from a resting position on the ground. The true Tyrannosaurus was not a clumsy, flawed monster. It was a finely tuned, highly successful predator. An animal whose every feature, from its filament-covered skin to its powerful, compact arms, was an adaptation for a life of violent supremacy. Our refusal to see it clearly, to accept the feathered, biomechanically sophisticated creature for what it was, says less about the dinosaur and far more about our own reflection, caught between the fossils we unearth and the comforting stories we prefer to tell. They remain an icon of biological absurdity. Arms barely a meter in length, attached to a body that stretched over 6 meters to the hip. A predator of unimaginable scale, seemingly hobbled by a comical design flaw. But to dismiss these appendages as weak is to misunderstand the creature entirely. Analysis of the powerful muscle attachments on the fossilized bone reveals a staggering truth. Each arm, where back gorilla, a benchmark of primate strength, can lift approximately 80 kilograms. The digits on these formidable limbs were tipped with claws reaching 10 centimeters in length, honed to the sharpness of a surgeon's scalpel. This was not a vestige, this was an arsenal. But what purpose could such an arsenal serve if it could not even reach the predator's own jaws, let alone its prey? Here, the true nature of the Tyrannosaurus hunt begins to unravel. It was not a career brutal, akin to that of a colossal terrestrial bird of prey. The primary weapon was not in its limbs, but in its skull. The jaws were a biological, crushing press, capable of delivering a bite with the force of nearly 6 tons per square centimeter. Its teeth, up to 30 centimeters long, were not the blades of a shark, designed for slicing flesh. They were thick, conical spikes, engineered for a single, devastating purpose: to shatter bone. With one apocalyptic bite, a Tyrannosaurus could drive these railroad spikes of enamel through the 15-centimeter thick skull of an adult Triceratops. After such a cataclysmic impact, the victim would be instantly incapacitated, its struggle silenced forever. The battle was over before it had truly begun. And only then, in the aftermath of the kill, did the arms find their purpose. Not to hold the prey, the immense power of the neck and jaw muscles made that redundant. Instead, they were critical to solving a fundamental problem of physics. A Tyrannosaurus weighed 6 tons. When a mass of that magnitude lowers itself to the ground to begin feeding on a carcass, it must eventually rise again. The inertia is immense. Modern birds, its distant relatives, use their wings for this very motion, pressing against the earth to lever their bodies upward. The Tyrannosaur, it is proposed, did precisely the same, its short, powerfully muscled arms acting as stabilizers and pistons, pushing its colossal torso off the ground. A second theory delves into a more intimate purpose. In the violent rituals of mating, many animals use their forelimbs to secure a grip on the female. Crocodiles, turtles, even certain birds. The muscular architecture of the Tyrannosaur's arms, with their ability of locking onto the scaly or perhaps feathered hide of another tyrannosaur, ensuring purchase during a crucial biological act. The most profound revelation, however, is that these short arms were not a sign of degradation, but of hyperspecialization. The Tyrannosaur's ancestors, the earlier Tyrannosauroids, possessed much longer 3-fingered arms. But as evolution progressed, as the skull grew larger and the bite force intensified, the need for long, grasping forelimbs simply vanished. Why would evolution waste precious energy maintaining powerful arms when a single bite could end any conflict? The process was one of ruthless optimization. As resources were funneled into developing the head into the most efficient killing tool the planet had ever seen, the arms were reduced, refined for specific secondary tasks. This was not a mistake of nature. It was the result of a cold and calculated economy of resources. And yet, in our films, our memes, our collective jokes, the Tyrannosaurus is forever the titan with the useless hands. A failure of anatomy. It is a simple caricature, born from the fact that it is far easier to laugh at that which we do not comprehend than it is to delve into the complex biomechanics of a Mesozoic apex predator. This pattern of myth-making extends beyond the king. If the Tyrannosaur is the monarch of paleontological misconception, then the Velociraptor is its prince. Thanks to the power of cinema, the world came to know a cunning, human-sized pack hunter, an intelligent predator capable of opening doors and remembering the faces of its victims, a monster born not of the fossil record, but of dramatic necessity. The fossil record offers only whispers, a fragmented story written in stone. Into the vast silences between these fragments, we pour our own narratives, our fears, and our fascinations. We sculpt these echoes into monsters and gestures, forgetting that each creature was a perfect answer to the questions its environment asked. The truth of these lost worlds is not a simple story of success or failure, but a complex tapestry of adaptation, a testament to life's relentless and often strange ingenuity. There is an image seared into our collective memory, a towering reptilian hunter, its scaly hide glistening under jungle moonlight. It is intelligent, relentless, a perfect killing machine born from cinematic fantasy. This specter must be banished. The animal it claims to represent, the true Velociraptor, bears almost no resemblance to this fiction. Our story begins not in a theme park, but in the sun-scorched expanse of the Gobi Desert. Here, in 1924, the fossil ghost of Velociraptor mongoliensis was first brought to light. The bones told a story not of a hulking monster, but of a creature of surprising delicacy. It was roughly the size of a modern turkey. From the tip of its slender snout to the end of its rigid tail, it measured approximately 2 meters. But this length is a deception. The vast majority was a stiff, balancing tail. At the hip, it stood barely half a meter tall, and its entire body weighed no more than 15 to 20 kilograms. Imagine not a leviathan, but a large hunting eagle, or a lean, wiry dog. This was the swift thief of the Cretaceous. So where did the cinematic chimera, the man-sized terror, originate? Its blueprint was stolen from a different creature entirely. The filmmakers looked to North America, to a larger, more formidable cousin named Deinonychus. This was a more imposing animal, stretching 3.5 meters long and weighing in at a substantial 70 kilograms, a predator on the scale of a wolf. Even so, Deinonychus itself fell short of the on-screen creation. The truth is a simple act of branding. The name Velociraptor, swift plunderer, was deemed more dramatic, more terrifying than Deinonychus, terrible claw. And so, a name was grafted onto a larger body, which was then scaled up even further for the sake of spectacle. But the deception runs deeper than mere scale. The most profound departure from reality lies not in its size, but in its skin. The sleek reptilian hide of the movie monster is a complete fabrication. The real Velociraptor was covered, from head to toe, in a complex tapestry of feathers. This is not speculation, this is fossil fact. On the ulna, a bone in the creature's forearm, paleontologists have discovered distinct bumps, quill knobs. These are the unmistakable anchor points for large, primary feathers, identical to those found on the wing bones of modern birds. Velociraptor had wings. It could not fly. Its body was too heavy, its arms too short for powered flight. These were not wings for soaring through Cretaceous skies. They may have been used to shield its young, a feathered cloak to protect a nest from the elements. Picture it, a 2-meter-long, predatory bird, grounded but fiercely alive, its body a downy coat, its arms adorned with long plumes, and a rigid fan of feathers on its tail for agility and balance at high speed. Its head was a long, narrow snout, filled with dozens of small, serrated teeth. And on each foot, it brandished the famous weapon, a 6-centimeter sickle claw, held aloft as it walked, ready to be deployed with devastating precision. This was not a reptilian monster. It was something far stranger, an evolutionary experiment, more akin to a demonic cassowary than a lizard from a nightmare. And here the story takes a curious turn. The scientific community has known, with certainty, about Velociraptor's feathers since the discovery of quill knobs in 2007. In the years since, 4 major sequels to the original film have been produced. In the most recent installment from 2022, the raptors remain stubbornly naked, their skin stubbornly reptilian. When film consultants were pressed on this deliberate ignorance of established science, the answer was a masterclass in cynicism. The audience, they claimed, was too accustomed to the scaly monster. They would not accept the feathered truth. And what of the creature's mind? The films portray them as strategic geniuses capable of coordinated attacks and complex communication. The reality is far more difficult to parse. The brain-to-body size ratio of Velociraptor was indeed high for a non-avian dinosaur. But this places its probable intelligence in the same league as a modern ostrich, or perhaps even a chicken. Clever for its time, but a world away from the sentient hunter of the silver screen. In the end, we are left with 2 versions of the same animal. One, a fiction, a cultural icon born of convenience and a cool-sounding name. The other, a far more bizarre and wonderful reality, pieced together from fragments of stone. The fossil record does not always give us the monsters we imagine. It gives us something far more valuable. The truth of a world that was, in all its feathered and unexpected glory. Its cognitive abilities placed it a tier above most of its saurian contemporaries, yet a vast chasm remained between its mind and the complex intelligence of primates or corvids. The Velociraptor's world was one of instinct, honed by a capacity to remember the location of a nest, to recognize its own kind, and perhaps to engage in the most rudimentary forms of coordinated hunting. A flicker of strategic thought in the primordial dark. But the line is drawn there. The capacity to turn a door handle, to distinguish one human face from another, to lay elaborate, multi-stage traps. These are phantoms of the silver screen. In the silent testimony of the fossil record, there exists not a shred of evidence for such sophisticated reasoning. And the most persistent fiction, the image that has clawed its way into our collective consciousness, is that of the pack. The fossil record, our only true witness, remains silent on this matter. Every discovery points to a life of solitude. We find single individuals, or on rare occasion a pair, their bones interred together by the slow work of millennia. There are no mass graves, no fossilized tableaus of a coordinated hunt. For comparison, we look to its larger cousin, Deinonychus, where several sites of mass mortality have been unearthed. Here, multiple skeletons lie together, a tantalizing clue that could suggest group behavior. Yet even this is mired in debate. Were they a pack brought down in a desperate struggle, or merely a congregation of scavengers drawn to a water source during a crippling drought, each dying independently as the world dried up around them? The truest echo of this ancient life may be found in the modern world. The monitor lizards, perhaps the closest living analogues in lifestyle, are masters of solitary predation. While several may converge upon a single large carcass, their gathering is born not of strategy, but of coincidence. It is not a coordinated hunt, but a frantic, competitive feast. It is a life of solitude and opportunity that we must therefore reimagine its method. This was a lone ambush predator, a creature of patience, waiting for its prey to wander into the kill zone. The attack would be a blur of motion from a concealed position, a single decisive strike with its famed sickle claw, aimed a week from catastrophic blood loss. And here we must dismantle another myth, the function of that iconic claw. In film, it is a gruesome tool for disembowelment, a living can opener that slices open a victim from sternum to groin. It is a visually stunning concept, but a biomechanical impossibility. The curve of the Velociraptor's claw was not designed for slashing. It was engineered to puncture and to hold. It was a hook, an anchor, its function mirroring the talons of a modern eagle. Today's birds of prey use their claws in precisely this manner. They strike, they impale, and they grip. The bird's own weight, combined with the momentum of its dive, generates sufficient force to pierce hide and muscle. The V-flank, or neck. Its forelimbs would grasp, holding it fast, while its jaws, filled with serrated teeth, began their grisly work. The prey, consumed by panic, would thrash and struggle, its own frantic movements serving only to deepen the wound, to turn the predator's anchor into an instrument of its own demise. Death would come not from a single clean cut, but from a cascade of trauma, blood loss, and profound shock. There were no choreographed leaps, no ballet of death danced around a terrified animal, no clever tactics whispered between packmates. There was only the swift, brutal, and efficient attack of a 20-kilogram. Yet, popular culture chose a different path, forging a monster from a misinterpretation. And now, millions hold as truth the image of a human-sized, primate-intelligent, pack-hunting killer. The reality was a creature far more fascinating, a feathered, solitary predator, the size of a large turkey, stalking the arid, wind-swept deserts of ancient Mongolia, its diet consisting of small lizards and primitive mammals. And so, the phantom of the cinema dissolves, replaced by a creature of flesh and bone, of instinct and survival. A creature whose story, however, is dwarfed by a far greater myth, the very story of its own extinction. It is a story etched into the stone of our collective memory, a truth so foundational it is taught before we can even properly spell the names of its colossal protagonists. Open any textbook, ask any child. The dinosaurs, they will tell you, perished 66 million years ago, their reign ended by a fiery messenger from. The flaw in this grand, tragic finale is simple. The dinosaurs never left. They are with us now, in this very moment. They soar past our windows on feathered wings. Their eggs, miracles of calcium and life, may very well rest in our kitchens. For modern science has not merely suggested, but has unequivocally proven that birds are not the descendants of dinosaurs, nor are they distant cousins. They are dinosaurs. A tenacious branch of the theropod family tree that stared into the abyss of a global cataclysm and survived. To understand this living legacy, we must first return to the day the world burned. 66 million years ago, a mountain of rock and ice, 10 kilometers wide and traveling at cosmic velocities, kept its appointment with Earth. It struck the shallow sea where the Yucatan Peninsula now lies. It did not impact so much as it vaporized, unleashing the energy of 100 million megatons of high explosive, a force billions of times greater than the bomb that fell on Hiroshima. The blast carved a crater 180 kilometers across, triggering a cascade of planetary destruction. Megatsunamis, kilometers high, scoured the coastlines of the globe. The sheer force of the impact ignited continent-spanning firestorms. A veil of dust and sulfurous aerosol choked the atmosphere, blotting out the sun and plunging the world into a sunless twilight that would last for years. It was the Great Dying. 75% of all species on the planet were extinguished. The titans of the land, Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, vanished forever. The skies were emptied of the pterosaurs, and the oceans, once ruled by mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, became silent tombs. The world's great photosynthetic engines sputtered and died. Yet in the ruin, life clung on. Small mammals, our own distant ancestors, survived by cowering in subterranean burrows. Crocodiles and turtles, masters of patience with metabolisms that could idle for months, weathered the famine. And among the embers and the ash, one lineage of dinosaur endured, the avians. Why them? What was their secret? The answer was not strength, but subtlety. It was size. The survivors were not giants. They were small, many no larger than a modern sparrow or pigeon. In a world of famine, smallness was a superpower. A smaller body requires less fuel, reproduces faster, and finds shelter more easily. While the last of the great carnivores starved, these tiny theropods survived on what remained: seeds, insects, and the carrion of a fallen world. They were also uniquely pre-adapted for the apocalypse. Feathers, once perhaps for display or courtship, now became a thermal cloak against the encroaching cold of the impact winter. Their warm-bloodedness, their internal furnace, allowed them to remain active in the deepening chill. And flight, the ultimate escape, gave them unparalleled mobility to traverse a shattered landscape, seeking out the last pockets of sanctuary and sustenance. Herein lies the great paradox of our perception. We mourn the passing of the dinosaurs, erecting their seas that fill our skies, inhabit every continent, and thrive in every climate from the Arctic to the Antarctic. We look at the sparrow and see only a fleeting, fragile thing. We fail to see the survivor. We fail to recognize the ghost of a raptor in its intelligent eye, the echo of an ancient world in its hollow bones. The dinosaurs did not die. They simply learned to fly, shrinking from the ruin of their former kingdom to inherit the sky. It is a mourning ritual enacted across the globe. The cracking of a shell, the release of a humble, unassuming egg. But within this fragile vessel lies a direct, unbroken lineage to a lost world, an echo of an age ruled by titans. We consume the progeny of creatures that are, in the strictest biological sense, dinosaurs. The chicken on the farm is a living relative of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Why does this profound truth feel so alien, so utterly disconnected from our reality? The answer lies not in biology, but in mythology. The word dinosaur has been claimed by our collective imagination, transformed from a scientific term into a cultural archetype. It conjures images of a colossus of scale and thunder, a creature of fang and claw, wrapped in armor of impenetrable hide. Crucially, it signifies something that is irrevocably extinct. A small feathered animal that flits through the trees is, to our minds, a bird. It cannot possibly be the other. The genetic and morphological evidence, however, is absolute. Modern classification is a language of merciless clarity. Dinosaurs are defined as a group of archosaurs that includes every creature descended from the last common ancestor of Triceratops and a common sparrow. Within this vast family tree, birds occupy their own branch. They are a subgroup of theropods, the bipedal predatory dinosaurs. The conclusion is inescapable. Birds are not merely descended from dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs. In the same way that bats are mammals that mastered flight, and whales are mammals that returned to the sea, birds are dinosaurs that conquered the sky. The acquisition of flight is a specialization, not a reclassification. Yet to state this simple fact to the average person, that dinosaurs never truly vanished, is to invite the same disbelief as claiming the Earth is flat. The image of the extinct, scaly monster is so deeply embedded in our consciousness that scientific fact struggles to find purchase. What is most remarkable is that this is not a recent revelation. The scientific community has understood this since the early 1970s. It was the paleontologist John Ostrom studying their saurian ancestors. By the 1980s, his theory had become the dominant view. And in the 1990s, a flood of astonishing discoveries from the fossil beds of China, dinosaurs cloaked in glorious fossilized plumage, provided the final, irrefutable proof. 50 years have passed. 2 generations have come of age since this scientific revolution. And still, the textbooks and documentaries so often repeat the old mantra. The dinosaurs were wiped out 65 million years ago. This stubborn refusal to see the dinosaur in the bird is rooted in a much older, more pervasive misconception, the myth of the stupid dinosaur. We imagine them as slow, clumsy, pea-brained behemoths, evolutionary failures destined for oblivion even without the cataclysm of an asteroid. This caricature was born in the infancy of paleontology when the first giant bones were unearthed and interpreted through a simplistic lens. They were seen as nothing more than titanic lizards, and since modern lizards are cold-blooded, slow, and possess relatively simple nervous systems, it was assumed that dinosaurs were merely scaled-up versions. The earliest reconstructions depicted them as lumbering, tail-dragging giants. So unwieldy they were thought to spend most of their lives in water, relying on buoyancy to support their immense weight. They were evolutionary dead ends, incapable of complex behavior. The ultimate poster child for this myth was Stegosaurus, a creature 9 meters in length, weighing 5 tons, armed with a fearsome thagomizer tail. Yet its skull housed a brain no larger than a walnut. 19th century paleontologists were so confounded by this disparity that they invented a desperate, almost fantastical solution, the theory of the second brain. They proposed that a large nerve cluster, a sacral ganglion located in the animal's pelvis, acted as a supplementary control center for its hind legs and tail. The primary brain, they argued, was simply too small to manage such a vast body. This idea, born of disbelief in the animal's own biology, endured for nearly a century, cementing itself in textbooks and popular culture as established fact. The shadows of these early misinterpretations are long. They obscure a far more dynamic and successful truth, a truth of warm-blooded, agile, and complex animals that dominated this planet for an unimaginable span of time. We dismissed them as failures, even as their living descendants flew over our heads. Perhaps the most stubborn fossil is not one of bone, but one of belief, lodged deep within the bedrock of our own minds. In the vast galleries of prehistory, few creatures have been so profoundly misunderstood as the Stegosaurus. It is an animal branded by a century of caricature as a biological failure, a lumbering giant so witless it required a second brain merely to command its own hindquarters. This myth, as enduring as the fossils themselves, paints a picture of an evolutionary dead end. But the truth, etched in stone and deciphered by science, tells a far more sophisticated story. The famed second brain was never a brain at all. Deep within its powerful pelvic girdle lay not a center of thought, but a significant enlargement of the spinal cord, a complex ganglion known as a sacral plexus. This feature is not unique. It is a fundamental piece of anatomy in all vertebrates, a neurological hub that coordinates the immense network of nerves running to the legs. In a creature weighing several tons, with a tail that could shatter bone, this command center was simply and logically enlarged. It was a matter of engineering, not intellect. To judge the Stegosaurus by the small size of its brain is to apply a human metric to an alien world. When compared not to mammals, but to its reptilian contemporaries and their modern descendants, its brain-to-body ratio was entirely unremarkable. The modern Komodo dragon and the saltwater crocodile possess a similar neurological blueprint. Yet no one would dare call these apex predators simple. They are capable of intricate behaviors, mapping territories, recognizing individuals, and executing meticulously planned ambushes. They are masters of their domain. The ultimate measure of success in nature is not intelligence, but endurance. By this standard, Stegosaurus was an unparalleled triumph. These armored herbivores thrived for nearly 40 million years, their distinctive silhouette a common sight on continents from North America to Africa. To place this in perspective, the entire history of our own genus, Homo, spans a mere 2 million years. Their dynasty outlasted ours by a factor of 20. Their strategy for survival was not just viable, it was profoundly effective. And what of the hunters that stalked these armored giants? The predatory dinosaurs reveal yet another layer of complexity. Here we see a significant leap in the ratio of brain to body, a mind capable of advanced calculation and coordination. Even the colossal Tyrannosaurus possessed a brain proportionally comparable to a large monitor lizard, more than enough to support the complex life of a dominant predator. This was not intellect in the abstract. It was a tool, manifesting in behaviors that defy the classic image of brutish, solitary monsters. The fossil record is a silent testament to their sophistication. We find nests where eggs are laid not in a haphazard clutch, but in deliberate spirals and concentric circles, a clear signature of conscious construction. The discovery of adult specimens fossilized alongside these nests speaks of guardianship, a primal form of parental care. At certain sites, evidence shows the same nesting grounds were used for generations, a tradition requiring long-term memory and a profound sense of place. Their social lives were just as intricate. The vast bone beds of Maiasaura in Montana paint a portrait of immense herds, thousands strong, moving as a single, living entity across the plains. Fossilized trackways, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, map out epic migrations. The consistent discovery of young and adult animals buried together suggests a communal structure, a society that protected its vulnerable and nurtured its offspring. This was a world not of mindless beasts, but of complex animal cultures. And yet, the question lingers. If they were so successful, so complex, why did they never achieve the cognitive heights of later mammals or birds? The answer is as simple as it is profound. They had no need. Their evolutionary strategy was built not on cunning, but on scale. For 160 million years, dinosaurs dominated the planet through sheer size, power, and diversity. Their formula worked flawlessly. There was no evolutionary pressure to change it. It was the mammals, our ancestors, who were forced down a different path. Small, nocturnal, and living in the shadows of titans, they could not compete on size or strength. Their survival depended on ingenuity, on being smarter, faster, and more adaptable than the giants who ruled the day. Intelligence was their weapon, born of necessity in a world where they were the prey. The dinosaurs never faced such a challenge. They were the immovable objects, the irresistible forces. Their world did not end because it was flawed or because its inhabitants were unintelligent. It ended because the universe is indifferent to success. A cataclysm from the heavens brought their age to a close, a cosmic upheaval that reset the evolutionary clock. The reign of the dinosaurs was not a primitive prelude to our own story. It was a complete and epic saga in its own right, a dynasty of life that mastered its world on its own terms. It was not cunning that secured their reign. They did not need to outwit their prey. They simply overwhelmed it with titanic force. And yet, the myth of the dim-witted dinosaur endures, a convenient fiction we tell ourselves. It offers a simple explanation for their extinction. It renders these ancient titans less terrifying. It allows us to feel a sense of evolutionary superiority over the monsters of prehistory. They vanished, the story goes, because they were foolish. We survived because we are intelligent. It is a comforting narrative, but it is a falsehood. This is not the only illusion we have crafted. Consider the very color of their world. Open any book from a previous generation, watch any older film, and the Mesozoic era is a world painted in monochrome. The dinosaurs moved through a landscape of muted earth tones, drab grays, muddy browns, and swampy greens. The logic of the artists was, on the surface, understandable. They looked to the largest land animals of our own time, the elephants and the rhinoceroses, and saw a similar palette. This dull coloration, they reasoned, would have served as camouflage, allowing colossal hunters and their prey to blend into the primeval forests and savannas. The problem with this logic is its profound and spectacular failure to account for the dinosaurs that still walk among us. For birds, we must remember, are not merely descendants of dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs. And in their plumage, we see a world of color that defies all notions of a drab prehistory. The macaw, the toucan, the bird of paradise, the pheasant, their feathers are canvases of breathtaking vibrancy. This explosion of color is not mere decoration. It is a critical language, used to attract a mate, to define a territory, to intimidate a rival, and even to regulate body temperature. And here our modern understanding begins. For within the last 20 years, paleontology has learned to read this lost language of color. Scientists are no longer guessing, no longer extrapolating. They are determining, with scientific precision, the true appearance of these animals. The key lies in microscopic time capsules called melanosomes, specialized organelles within cells that manufacture and store pigment. The shape and arrangement of these melanosomes directly correlate to color. In modern birds, the code is predictable. Elongated, sausage-shaped melanosomes produce black and gray hues. Small, spherical ones create reddish browns and yellows. When fossilized imprints of feathers are discovered, these ghostly remnants of pigment sometimes remain. Placed under the devastating magnification of an electron microscope, their structure is revealed. Their shape, their size, their density, all of it can be seen. And from this data, the true colors of a creature dead for 100 million years can be resurrected, shade by shade. The first to step out of the gray past was Sinosauropteryx. A small, feathered predator from early Cretaceous China, it was roughly 1 meter in length. The analysis of its fossilized proto-feathers was a revelation. Its back was a rich reddish-brown, its belly a stark white. Its long tail was ringed with bold, alternating stripes of white. It was a billboard, a vibrant display for social communication in a world far more colorful than we ever dared to imagine. Tosaur, the size of a crow, was a creature of stark and dramatic contrast. A body of jet black, wings of brilliant white tipped in black, and a magnificent crest of crimson feathers crowning its head. Microraptor, another four-winged hunter, was cloaked in feathers that shimmered with an iridescent blue-black gloss. Psittacosaurus, an early relative of the horned ceratopsians, possessed a sophisticated form of countershading, a dark back and a light belly for camouflage. But its shoulders were adorned with bright, disruptive patches, perhaps for display. The vast majority of fossils will never yield these secrets. The conditions for such perfect preservation are impossibly rare. But what has been uncovered is enough. It has forever altered our vision of the ancient world. The silent gray monsters of our imagination have been replaced by creatures of unimagined splendor, their lives painted in a spectrum of color we are only just beginning to rediscover. The past was not a muted prologue to our own time. It was a world roaring with a life and a vibrancy all its own. The late Cretaceous sun filters through the canopy of ancient conifers, dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Through the ferns emerges a herd of Parasaurolophus, their immense bodies moving with a placid grace. For generations, we painted these creatures in our minds as drab, monochrome giants, cloaked in the dull gray and unremarkable green of reptiles. A convenient fiction born from a lack of evidence. But science has since illuminated this lost world with startling clarity. The magnificent, hollow crests rising from their skulls were not drab bone. They were vibrant semaphores, broadcasting messages across the fern-choked clearings. We now envision them ablaze in a symphony of color, scarlet, ochre, perhaps even iridescent blue. These were the billboards of the Mesozoic. A male seeking a mate would display his crest, a declaration of his health and genetic fitness. Rival males would face one another, their worth measured not in combat, but in the size and shocking brilliance of their cranial ornaments. And amidst the herd, the younger animals would move with a more subdued palette, their turn to shine still years away. This explosion of color was not limited to the gentle herbivores. Consider the tyrant king, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Here, the fossil record is more reticent, a silent witness that has not yet surrendered the secrets of its skin or plumage. But logic and phylogeny provide a compelling narrative. We know it was a theropod, a cousin to the feathered dinosaurs of China, whose fossilized remains whisper of jewel-toned coats and elaborate patterns. We know it engaged in complex social behaviors, from courtship to familial bonds. Such complexity almost always demands a visual language. Therefore, the lumbering, swamp-green monster of old textbooks is almost certainly a failure of imagination. We must instead envision a creature of terrifying magnificence. Perhaps the males bore a mantle of crimson or flame-orange feathers upon their head and neck, a fearsome crown for a fearsome king. Perhaps their flanks were adorned with stripes or spots, patterns of recognition in the reality was anything but drab. Let us step fully into this reconstructed world. 67 million years passed. A vast herd of Edmontosaurus grazes in a sunlit meadow. Their broad backs are the color of moss and earth, a perfect camouflage from above. But their sides are slashed with startling orange stripes. From the cover of the giant ferns, a young Albertosaurus, cousin to the Tyrannosaurus, begins its stalk. Its body is not scaled and gray, but covered in a thick down of ginger and russet hues, and a low, bony crest above its eyes burns a defiant red. A flock of Troodons, the mean skin of its vast wings marked with patches of brilliant sky blue. This is not a fantasy. This is a reality painstakingly pieced together from fossilized pigments, bone structures, and ecological modeling. Yet, in the popular imagination, the gray monsters persist. It is a peculiar cultural inertia, a reluctance by artists and filmmakers to abandon the familiar fiend for the vibrant, living animal. Perhaps they fear the audience will not accept a dinos. But the crimes against paleontological accuracy are not confined to color. An even more fundamental myth, one that causes paleontologists to shudder, is the myth of the dragging tail. The classic image is etched into our collective memory, a hulking dinosaur, its body pitched forward in a slouch, its massive tail dragging uselessly behind it, carving a furrow in the primordial mud. This reconstruction is a profound misunderstanding of anatomy and physics. A dinosaur's tail was not a piece of inert baggage. It was a direct extension of the spine, a marvel of biological engineering, packed with powerful muscles and interwoven with a lattice of tendons. In many species, these tendons were ossified, turned to bone, creating a rigid, dynamic rudder that held the tail aloft, parallel to the ground. This structure was the key to their success. The tail was a critical counterbalance to the enormous head and torso, allowing for agility and speed. It was a stabilizer during a high-speed pursuit. A living gyre drag, such a vital piece of anatomy, would be ludicrously inefficient. It would create immense friction, wasting colossal amounts of energy with every step. It would chafe the skin, inviting infection and injury. The final, irrefutable evidence lies etched in stone. Across the globe, paleontologists have unearthed millions of fossilized footprints, entire trackways that map the movements of these animals across ancient landscapes. We see the clear impressions of their feet, we can measure their stride, we can even deduce their speed. But in all these millions of tracks, not a single accompanying trace of a dragging tail has ever been found. Not one. The silence of the stone is deafening. It is the complete absence of evidence that provides the most damning verdict. The modern reconstruction reveals a creature transformed. No longer a clumsy, tail-dragging behemoth, the dinosaur stands as an active, athletic animal, its body held horizontally, its tail extended straight out behind it, a picture of dynamic grace. To see them as they were is to see a world not of lumbering evolutionary failures, but of vibrant, sophisticated, and astonishingly successful creatures. The past was not a muted prologue, rendered in shades of gray and brown. It was as loud, as colorful, and as brilliantly alive as the world we know today. To deny this is to misunderstand not only the dinosaur, but the very nature of life itself. A perfectly engineered chassis, held in a state of rigid horizontal grace. The head, the spine, and the tail form a single unbroken line, running parallel to the earth below. The entire weight of the animal, its center of gravity, is balanced precisely above the hips. This is not a posture of rest, but of readiness. It is the biomechanical blueprint for explosive speed, for sudden, agile turns, for the most efficient and powerful locomotion nature can devise. We see this design today echoed in the living world. It is the form of the ostrich, the emu, the cassowary, flightless birds built for a life on the run. And 100 million years before them, it was the form of the bipedal dinosaurs. But this principle of a balanced, elevated tail was not exclusive to the runners. Even the colossal quadrupeds, the sauropods, the diplodocus, the brachiosaurus, held their immense tails aloft, suspended in the air as a critical counterbalance. For some, the tail was more than just a stabilizer, it was a weapon. In the case of Diplodocus, its tail tapered to an impossibly long and slender tip, a whip forged of bone and sinew. Biomechanical models reveal a terrifying capability. With a single fluid motion, a Diplodocus could lash this appendage with such velocity that its tip would break the sound barrier. Imagine the sound, a deafening report, a sonic boom exceeding 150 decibels, louder than an artillery piece firing at close range. This was not a passive defense, it was an active, fearsome deterrent, a shockwave capable of shattering bone and striking terror into any predator foolish enough to approach. And yet, for a century, our vision of this animal was the complete opposite. The old reconstructions, the images that filled textbooks and museum halls, depicted a lethargic giant, a clumsy, slow-moving behemoth, condemned to a life in the swamps, its magnificent tail dragging uselessly through the mud. This single flawed image, born of incomplete understanding, would give rise to one of the most pervasive myths in all of paleontology. Modern research has not just revised this picture, it has utterly demolished it. The sauropods were dynamic, terrestrial animals, some capable of speeds up to 40 kilometers per hour. They were active defenders, undertaking vast migrations that spanned thousands of kilometers. The most egregious myth of all was their supposed habitat, the swamp. This idea took hold in the early 20th century when paleontologists, faced with skeletons of unimaginable size, reached the conclusion based on the limits of their own world. The logic seemed inescapable. The largest land animal they knew, the elephant, weighed around 6 tons, and this was surely the upper limit of what a terrestrial skeleton could support. Sauropods, weighing up to 80 tons, would have been crushed by their own mass on dry land. Therefore, they must have lived in water, their immense bodies supported by the constant, gentle embrace of buoyancy. This single assumption spawned an entire ecosystem of supporting myths. The high placement of the nostrils on a sauropod skull was interpreted not as a feature of facial anatomy, but as a snorkel, allowing the creature to breathe with only the top aug into the canopy of ancient. The problem is that this picture shatters against the unforgiving laws of physics and biology. Consider the simple reality of water pressure. If an animal weighing 50 tons were to submerge itself in just 3 meters of water, the pressure exerted on its chest cavity would be powerless to expand the lungs against such force. The animal would simply suffocate under its own ambition to live an aquatic life. But even if it could somehow withstand the pressure, a second, more fundamental problem arises: buoyancy. An 80-ton animal is a massive object, but its body was far from solid. It contained enormous lungs, a complex system of air sacs, and bones that were themselves riddled with hollow spaces. A sauropod was, in essence, a colossal, living zeppelin. Had it attempted to walk along the bottom of a lake, it would not have been gracefully supported. It would have been violently ejected, the most in imagination, an attempt to constrain the truly alien world of the past within the familiar boundaries of the present. The truth, as science has revealed, is infinitely more spectacular. Imagine attempting to submerge an inflatable mattress in a swimming pool. The harder you push, the more insistently it resists, fighting to return to the surface. For decades, paleontology has been engaged in a similar struggle with a deeply entrenched idea: the image of the great sauropods as aquatic beasts. Its a romantic birth itself tells a different story, a narrative written in stone and bone. Analysis of fossilized trackways reveals, with stark clarity, that these titans walked upon firm, solid ground. The depth of their ghostly imprints, the vast distance between each stride, the precise angle of the bones within their limbs, every detail points not to a life of buoyancy, but to a constant battle against gravity. Furthermore, the geological context of these finds is overwhelmingly terrestrial. Scientists sifting through the layers of time discover not the remnants of ancient bogs or sprawling lakes, but the soil of savannas, the petrified wood of open forests, and the sedimentary deposits of river valleys. The world of the sauropods was a dry one. The most compelling evidence, however, is etched into their very architecture. The legs of all pillars, straight and thick, with powerful musculature, a design perfected for a single monumental purpose: to support unimaginable weight on land. They are the legs of an elephant, scaled up to a breathtaking degree. And yet, in half of the world's children's books, the sauropod still stands chest deep in water. The image is so powerful, so deeply rooted in our cultural consciousness, that the evidence struggles to displace the myth. This stubborn vision of the water-bound giant feeds into a far grander misconception, one that has defined dinosaurs for generations: that they were all creatures of impossible scale. Ask any child to describe a dinosaur, and they will speak of giants, of monsters that blotted out the sun and made the ground tremble with every step. There is a kernel of truth to this legend. Among the dinosaurs walked the largest land animals in the history of our planet. Argentinosaurus, a true titan of the Cretaceous, could reach a length of 35 meters and a weight of 80 tons, a living structure the size of a 10-story building. But this is where the popular narrative falters. These giants were the spectacular exception, not the rule. The Mesozoic era was not merely an age of titans, it was an age of incredible diversity. Of the more than 1,000 distinct dinosaur species that have been described, a staggering 70% weighed less than 100 kilograms. The vast majority of dinosaurs were the size of a chicken, a dog, or a goat. They are the forgotten majority, their stories untold, simply because they lack the raw spectacle of their larger cousins. Their names are a whisper in the shadow of giants. Microraptor, a four-winged predator just 60 centimeters long, weighing a single kilogram. Lasutosaurus, a nimble herbivore no bigger than a gazelle. Pedops, a testament to a world teeming with life in every ecological niche. Even many of the most famous dinosaurs were far smaller than their cinematic portrayals suggest. The Velociraptor of film is a human-sized terror. The real animal was a feathered hunter weighing around 20 kilograms. Protoceratops was the size of a sheep. The mighty Pachycephalosaurus, known for its domed skull, reached 4.5 meters in length, but most of that was tail. And Compsognathus, a familiar sight in illustrations, was scarcely larger than a chicken. Even within the great dynasties of giants, there was immense variation. The 50-ton Brachiosaurus had a smaller relative, Europatitan, that weighed a mere ton. The 6-ton Tyrannosaurus Rex descends to a complex world, a calculation of climate, food availability, and the constant pressure of competition. Why then does the Titan dominate our collective imagination? Because giants leave the deepest impression. Because the skeleton of an Apatosaurus, its vertebrae spanning the length of a museum hall, is an encounter that remains with us for a lifetime. Because films about colossal monsters command our attention and fill the box office. We are drawn to the magnificent, the terrifying, the sublime. But in focusing only on the colossal, we risk missing the richer, more intricate truth. That the age of dinosaurs was not just a parade of giants, but a vibrant, complex tapestry of life, woven from threads both great and small. The titans of our imagination are born from bone, yet shaped by narrative. We assemble a cast of prehistoric superstars for a drama of our own making, a spectacle of tooth and claw. In this theater of the mind, Tyrannosaurus, the undisputed king, relentlessly pursues the plated Stegosaurus. Allosaurus harries the great sauropods, and the cunning Velociraptor hunts in packs. These are the classic confrontations, the predator-prey duels, etched into our collective consciousness by decades of films and illustration. But there is a single, insurmountable problem with this epic menagerie. The majority of these ancient rivals never met. They're ghosts from different epochs, phantoms separated by an expanse of time so vast it defies human comprehension. To understand this temporal distortion, we must first grapple with the scale of prehistory. The reign of the dinosaurs spanned 180 million years. By comparison, the entire story of our own species, from the first Homo sapiens to the present day, is a mere 300,000 years. We are a fleeting whisper in the geological saga, occupying less than 1/1000% of the time these creatures dominated the Earth. Across those 180 million years, the world was remade time and again. Continents drifted, oceans opened and closed, climates shifted from sweltering greenhouses to cooler, more arid landscapes. Countless ecosystems rose and fell, each with its own unique cast of inhabitants. Consider the classic duel, Tyrannosaurus Rex versus Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus, with its iconic backplates and thagomizer tail, roamed the floodplains of the late Jurassic, approximately 150 million years ago. Tyrannosaurus, the apex predator of its age, lived at the very end of the Cretaceous, around 68 million years ago. The gulf of time separating them is a staggering 82 million years. To place this in perspective, the chasm between the last Tyrannosaurus and the first human is smaller, only 66 million years. In a very real sense, the Stegosaurus was more ancient to Tyrannosaurus than Tyrannosaurus is to us. When the tyrant lizard walked the earth, the bones of Stegosaurus were already deeply buried fossils, silent relics of a world long vanished. The true contemporaries of Tyrannosaurid, Edmontosaurus. These were its neighbors, its rivals, and its The story of Allosaurus, however, aligns more closely with the fossil record. This formidable Jurassic predator, living 150 million years ago, did indeed share its environment with Stegosaurus. They were true contemporaries, their bones found in the same rock formations of North America. Here, the narrative of a life and death struggle is plausible, a genuine drama played out on the ancient Morrison Formation. And then there is the Velociraptor. This creature inhabited the arid deserts of what is now Mongolia around 80 million years ago. Its world was shared with a stout, beaked herbivore named Protoceratops, This pairing is not just speculation, it is confirmed by one of the most extraordinary fossils ever discovered. The fighting dinosaurs specimen captures a mortal struggle, frozen in time. A Velociraptor, its lethal sickle claw embedded in the neck of a Protoceratops, is itself trapped, its arm crushed in the powerful beak of its prey. They were locked in their final, violent embrace when a collapsing sand dune or a sudden sandstorm buried them instantly, preserving their battle for eternity. Yet, if you ask a child to name the most famous Dinosaurus and Triceratops, this is an impossible assemblage, a roster of creatures separated by tens of millions of years and thousands of miles. It is the prehistoric equivalent of staging a battle between a Roman legionary, a medieval knight, and a modern soldier, pretending they all existed in the same army. The reason for this temporal distortion is simple: spectacle. Popular culture demands a grand stage where all the most famous actors can appear at once. Explaining the nuanced and complex truths of geochronology and paleogeography is seen as a narrative burden. It is far easier and more profitable to collapse deep time into a single, thrilling dinosaur age. Perhaps the most influential scientific distortion of the modern era arrived in the early 1990s. Michael Crichton's novel and Steven Spielberg's subsequent cinematic behemoth, Jurassic Park, represented a seismic shift. For the first time on a global scale, dinosaurs were not the sluggish, tail-dragging monsters of old. They were presented as active, intelligent, and terrifyingly dynamic animals, a vision that was, at the time, a bold step towards scientific accuracy. But in our thirst for a thrilling story, we often favor the dramatic fiction over the more profound reality. The true story of the dinosaurs is not one of a single crowded stage, but an immense, sprawling epic of countless worlds, each in making, and in the silent testimony of the stone, begin to glimpse the ghosts of the worlds that truly were. In the shadow of a bygone era, the dinosaur was a lumbering, cold-blooded behemoth, a symbol of evolutionary failure, slow of mind and body. But in the year 1993, a cinematic bolt of lightning shattered that image, replacing it with one of terrifying speed, cunning, and reptilian intelligence. It was a monumental shift, a welcome departure from the sluggish giants of... Yet, more than 3 decades have now passed since that cultural reset. In that time, the science of paleontology has undergone not one, but a cascade of revolutions. Hundreds of new species have been unearthed from the stone, each a new paragraph in Earth's ancient story. The irrefutable link between dinosaur and bird has been forged, transforming our understanding of the evolutionary tree. We have proven the existence of feathers on the vast majority of theropods, painting a picture not of scaly monsters, but of magnificent feathered beasts. Through microscopic analysis of fossilized pigments, the very colors they wore have been coaxed from the rock, revealing a world far more vibrant than we ever dared to imagine. Their biomechanics, their metabolism, their social behaviors, all have been fundamentally rewritten by a torrent of new evidence. But the colossal franchise born in that decade chose to look away. It froze a single, thrilling, but deeply flawed interpretation in cinematic amber. More than a simple oversight, this was a conscious decision. The creators openly declared that they would not depict dinosaurs with feathers, arguing that audiences had grown accustomed to a specific, scaly image. It is an argument as staggering as a modern filmmaker depicting a flat Earth, only to explain that viewers are used to thinking that way, so why confuse them with the facts of orbital mechanics? The result has been a profound and lasting schism in public understanding. 3 generations have now been raised on a vision of the Mesozoic that is profoundly, demonstrably false. The image forged in Hollywood has become so deeply entrenched that it has ossified into a cultural standard, a baseline against which reality itself is judged. Any attempt to present a scientifically accurate dinosaur, cloaked in its rightful plumage, is met not with curiosity, but with confusion and even indignation. People with genuine conviction will recoil and declare, "That's not what a real..." They are, of course, defending a fiction, The real Velociraptor was a feathered creature, no larger than a turkey, a swift, intelligent predator, but a world away from the 6-foot scaly movie monster that haunts our collective imagination. This has created a unique pathology in the history of scientific dissemination. Typically, knowledge flows outward from a core of specialists, filtering through academic journals, then popular science, school textbooks, and finally, into the broad currents of mass culture. With dinosaurs, the process was inverted. The scientific data exists, the specialists have known it for decades, but mass culture actively rejects it because a more profitable fiction was deemed more palatable. And the most sobering part is that this strategy has been a resounding success. Films featuring inaccurate dinosaurs amass billions at the box office. Toys of these scaly phantoms are sold by the millions. Books filled with outdated illustrations become international bestsellers. Meanwhile, attempts to showcase the real, feathered animals are often treated as strange, almost heretical, exotica. This adherence to an obsolete image is but the tip of a vast, submerged iceberg of myth. The notion that dinosaurs were universally cold-blooded, for instance, has been decisively overturned. Evidence overwhelmingly points to the majority being mesothermic or even fully endothermic, with high-octane metabolisms that fueled active, dynamic life. The structure of their vocal cords, inferred from fossilized remains and their avian relatives, suggests either bones more than heard by the ear. The myth of the uncaring reptile abandoning its eggs to fate also crumbles under the weight of evidence. We have found fossilized nests showing complex arrangements and even skeletal remains of parents brooding over their young, a silent testament to a parental devotion that transcends the ages. Even the idea of universal egg-laying has been refined. While true dinosaurs were indeed oviparous, many of the great marine reptiles often And finally, the cataclysm itself. The clean, simple story of a single asteroid impact causing an instantaneous, planet-wide extinction is a dramatic but simplistic fiction. The end of their rays of thousands of years, a world fading to gray as different groups succumbed at different times to the cascading environmental collapse. We find ourselves in a peculiar epoch where a fictional animal has, in many ways, become more real to us than the true one. The chasm between the creature that was and the monster we have created reveals a profound truth, that the most powerful stories are not always the most accurate, and once they take root in the human mind, they can prove more resilient and enduring than stone itself. The Great Dying was not a single, clean stroke. In the shadow of the asteroid, some species clung to existence, only to be extinguished later by a world irrevocably changed. The nuances of this each long-held myth, of sluggish, dim-witted beasts doomed from the start, has been systematically dismantled by a torrent of evidence. Hundreds of scientific papers have been published. Dozens of definitive books have been written. Documentaries, crafted with painstaking care, have laid out the new consensus. Yet, stop a person on any given street, and the world they describe is a ghost from a 1970s textbook. A faded, inaccurate picture, endlessly circulating through the arteries of popular culture. The question is not what we know, but why so little of it has been heard. The reasons are layered, buried deep in our cultural geology. The first is simple inertia. For more than 100 years, the dinosaur has been imagined as a lumbering, scaly monster. This archetype, born from the earliest fossil discoveries and Victorian anxieties, is etched so profoundly into the collective psyche that then there is the formidable gravity of the entertainment industry. Hollywood has constructed a multi-billion-dollar empire upon a foundation of scientifically inaccurate dinosaurs. The roaring, featherless Tyrannosaurus is not an animal. It is a global brand, a proven formula for success. There is little incentive to revise a narrative that continues to fill theaters and sell merchandise. This is compounded by an educational system perpetually outpaced by the velocity of discovery. Textbooks are updated perhaps once a decade, sometimes longer. By the time a new truth enters the classroom, science has already leaped forward, leaving the curriculum a relic of a bygone understanding. But beneath these institutional failings lies a far more potent, more human reason. We do not want our beloved dinosaurs to change. The Tyrannosaur of Jurassic Park is more than a movie monster. It is the cultural inheritance of an entire generation. It is the texture of nostalgia, the sound of childhood awe, an emotional anchor in our personal histories. When a scientist presents evidence that it was, in fact, a very different creature, perhaps covered in proto-feathers, with a different posture, a different sound, the statement is not heard as a correction. It is perceived as an assault on memory, an attack on childhood itself. We have seen this phenomenon before. When astronomers reclassified Pluto, stripping it of its planetary status, the public outcry was genuine and fierce. The anger did not stem from a deep understanding of orbital mechanics or the definition of a celestial body. It came from a place of profound loss. Pluto was the 9th planet they had memorized as children's. Cement is the same, but the scale is immeasurably larger. Herein lies the great paradox of modern paleontology. Never in human history have we known more about these animals. Never have our reconstructions been so vivid, so breathtakingly precise. Science now wields tools of unimaginable power, computed tomography scans that reveal the delicate architecture of a brain case, molecular analysis that teases out traces of ancient proteins from fossilized bone, biomechanical modeling that calculates the force of a predator's bite with terrifying accuracy. And yet, for all this progress, the popular imagination remains captive to the last century. What then is to be done? The obvious answer is education. To update the textbooks, rewrite the encyclopedias, to fund a new wave of documentaries. But this is a slow, arduous process, demanding immense resources to combat decades of misinformation. And even if it were accomplished, the towering monoliths of Hollywood and the toy industry would remain, their interests lying not in scientific fidelity, but in market familiarity. Perhaps the solution is not to wage a war against the old images, but to create new ones so powerful they render the old obsolete. To dare to produce a blockbuster film where dinosaurs are portrayed with feathers in all their strange and vibrant reality, a spectacle so emotionally resonant it forges a new cultural standard. To design a video game where the Velociraptor is its true, turkey-sized self, yet is rendered so cunning and lethal that its memory eclipses its cinematic caricature. To write the book that captures the sublime, alien beauty of the real Mesozoic world. This path requires more than just knowledge. It requires courage. It demands a willingness to risk alienating an audience, to challenge cherished beliefs, and to show these magnificent creatures not as we have imagined them, but as they truly were. It is the ultimate test of our ability to let go of the comforting fictions of the past, in order to embrace the far more wondrous and complex truth. They were vibrant, feathered, impossibly diverse and complex. Not the lumbering monsters of our collective nightmare, but living, breathing animals, governed by a real and tangible biology. And herein lies the great tragedy of the myths we have constructed around them. They have made the dinosaurs infinitely more boring than they ever were in life. The scaly, drab-green Tyrannosaurus is a cliché, a cultural fossil frozen in time. It is an image born of convenience, not of evidence. But imagine, for a moment, a different scene. A Tyrannosaurus, cloaked not in monotonous scales, but in a mantle of primitive feathers, catching the hues of a volcanic sunset. See it moving with purpose through a forest of giant sequoias, its shadow falling upon a herd of hadrosaurs, their own ornate crests flashing with brilliant color. In the distance, a plume of ash rises into the twilight sky. This is not a monster movie. This is an epic, a drama, a history that breathes. The true Mesozoic was a world of staggering variety. It was a planet woven from landscapes now lost to time. There were sprawling forests of giant tree ferns and the very first flowering plants, their scents new to the world. There were vast savannas where herds of ceratopsians, each the size of an elephant, grazed under an unfamiliar sun. There were sun-scorched deserts, stalked by small, feathered predators, their movements, ancient kings in their own right. And the skies. The skies belonged to the pterosaurs, some with wingspans stretching over 10 meters, soaring T-whales of our own age, masters of a blue kingdom. This was a world where evolution was not merely tinkering, it was conducting a grand symphony of creation, experimenting with form and scale on a level that has never been repeated. Entire ecosystems rose and fell. Every million years brought forth new species, new adaptations, new ways of life. This Earth was profoundly more interesting, more alien, and more magnificent than the simplified picture in our old school book. But to witness this lost kingdom in its true splendor, we must first let go. We must be willing to abandon the comfortable myths of childhood. We must accept that what we were taught was incomplete or simply wrong. Only by embracing this new, more complex knowledge can the true story of the dinosaurs be revealed. It is not a fairy tale of dim-witted brutes who failed to survive a catastrophe. It is the grand saga of the most successful group of terrestrial vertebrates in the history of our planet. For 180 million years they reigned. They conquered every continent, adapted to every climate zone, and mastered every ecological niche. They range from tiny insect eaters to colossal herbivores weighing over 80 tons. They developed powered flight, warm-blooded metabolisms, and complex social behaviors. They weathered mass extinctions, radical shifts in climate, and the slow, inexorable drift of the continents themselves. And then, the final, most astonishing revelation. They did not truly vanish. They simply changed. They endured. They transformed, becoming the birds that live alongside us to this very day. This is a history of evolution's triumph, not its defeat. It is a testament to how endlessly diverse and inventive life can be. And it is a stark reminder of how easily we accept a convenient fiction over a challenging truth. The next time you stand before the skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus in a museum, see it not as a green-skinned monster, but as an active, intelligent creature, perhaps brightly adorned in feathers. When you see a reconstruction of a human-sized Velociraptor, remember that the real animal was 4 times smaller, covered in plumage, a hunter of profound grace. And when you read that the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago, simply look out your window. A sparrow, flitting from a branch, is a direct descendant. It is the dinosaur that survived the firestorm, a living echo of a world we are only just beginning to understand. Perhaps then we will finally learn to value the authentic history of the dinosaurs over the fantasies born of celluloid. We will trade the roar of the silver screen for the silent, profound story told by stone and time. For the truth, unearthed from the deep past in all its staggering complexity, will always be a narrative far richer, far more compelling than any myth we could ever invent. It is a story that waits patiently, demanding only that we possess the will to listen.